All right. Hi, my name is Andre Koen, and I am the Program Director for the Office of Diversity and Inclusion.
I'm Amrita Prakashna. I'm a diversity recruitment specialist and the department diversity leader with Klaus for HR.
Sweet, sweet, sweet. So, we want to talk with you just a little bit about this Beyond Your Bias training opportunity, right? So, this is a supplemental to the unconscious bias training and the
Stereotype threat.
stereotype threat training. So, we want to take this time and just kind of guide you as a facilitator through this process so that you, any questions you have, maybe we can kind of hit those early, and then your facilitation of the session will go a lot smoother. Right. So Amrita, what were some of your first impressions when you took on the opportunity to facilitate this session?
Well, I was excited that we had this space to have conversations around the video modules that we watched because you get ideas and you want to talk about it and see how that actually impacts you in real life. So this opportunity was great. I was a little nervous because this is not like an Excel training where you can say, this is where you click and you get this information. This kind of training raises a lot of questions. People are questioning biases. It's an uncomfortable situation for a lot of us. And so I was a little nervous about what might come forward and will I be able to handle it. And if you are present at the training as a trainer, we're all learning, we're continuously learning. So when you are present there, you will be able to answer situations. And if you're not, it's always good to say, hey, I'm not sure how to answer that, but I will get you the answer, and then go back to your team or the ODI office and get that information.
Yeah, and also don't forget that the people who are in the workshop are coming to learn, and they want you to be successful as well, right? So they want to have success, but they also want you to be successful. And so more often than not, people will be uncomfortable talking about things, but are more than happy to answer or participate by particularly with your guidance, right? So they're looking to you as the facilitator to help guide the conversation because they want to participate, which that's why they're there, right?
And
Other
unless
things,
unless
yeah.
we're willing to challenge what we're uncomfortable with, there's no way we'll grow. So we're all here with that space.
Yeah,
The other thing too is I think the guides that you will be provided are just that, they're guides. So come with your own personal examples, your own situations that you want to talk about, because that will be authentic. The stories will mean more when they have some emotion and feeling behind it. So use the guides as the direction for the program and then the exercises to get these conversations rolling. But try to identify examples in your own life or with conversations with others that have touched a nerve with you that you want to share with the group.
The other thing is to kind of map your journey. So whether you're doing a 60-minute session, a 90-minute session, or a 120-minute session, make sure you know where you want to go. There are more than enough activities to fill up that time and more if you actually give people time for discussion, right? So make sure you pick the highlights that you want to make sure, or the ideas, the concepts that you want to get across in that session, that you pick those early, because that'll help you navigate your session more effectively. All right. So let's get right into the presentation, right? So first we'll start off with this Beyond Your Bias title slides. We'll move into. It was working just a second ago.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. So you'll get into the agenda. So you just share the agenda with the participants in the room. Talk a little bit about the unconscious bias and stereotype threat modules, so that people remember that this is a part of or an extension of that learning opportunity, of both those learning opportunities.
But just a reminder that it's not the training. So the whole training is not going to be talking about just those two modules, because we've had some people come in feeling that that's what they would get out of this session. This is to go beyond the two modules.
Yeah. And actually try to make those two modules applicable and pragmatic in our daily practice, right? So the first activity will be the values activity that you'll undertake. And the values activity, how would you explain the values activity?
It's kind of to highlight what are your core values, and people use different words and different terms for it. And so you're helping people identify their core values and then showing people that even if someone else is different from you, they probably have the same core values. And that's the basis behind this exercise.
Yeah, really focusing on commonalities and differences simultaneously. So the procedure, if you will, is simply to have people write down 5 of their values, 1 in each of the circles, and then spend about maybe 3 minutes or less, depending on what kind of time frame you have, thinking, having people sign their name to things that are similar, right? So having people put their signature on things that they have that are in common or similar with other folks in the room.
For instance, I might mark my 5 values, or the top 2, say family or work, and then Andre might do the same thing, and maybe he says friends and he says the gym, for instance. Now, it sounds different, but then if you look at the core value, it is affection and love for people, friends and family, so that's something that would be a commonality.
Yeah. And so after about 3 minutes of this activity or less, depending on, again, your time frame, the reflection questions become the most important. And so we typically start with the questions around what was missing off of yours that you saw on someone else's chart, right? And what have you found when we ask that question?
I've had people say, oh, well, my health, or even family for that matter, because they come in here and they're thinking this is a professional space, so their values are around work and around where they are at, but then they realize someone else has talked about personal values that are still important to them.
Yeah. And so when we start off with that question, what did you see on someone else's paper that may have been missing from yours? And we get those responses, maybe 2 or 3 of those responses. And then we move on to the other question, which is what was difficult to find someone to sign on? And what we use that question to really help people think about the fact that they have commonalities, even though they may not have written some of those things down. And so the closing statement for this particular activity really is around looking at diversity as the accounting of our commonalities and our differences, right? And so at the end of this activity, the takeaway should be that we are very much alike, but we're also very different.
And we have to respect both, because we're not trying to make everyone standard here. We have to respect our differences and commonalities.
Yeah. So that's that first activity. So we hope that we gave you just enough nugget to be able to facilitate this on your own.
What's interesting with this activity too, it's 2 activities in one, right? That's the first activity is the 5 values around that larger circle. The next one is the largest circle, which is the circle of all knowledge. And it's your pie that you're going to have people cut.
Yeah. So this is one way to think about this is the Taharis Window. And so you can look that up on your own, but this is a version of this Taharis Window, which talks about your perspective, right? Your paradigm, how you see the world. And so typically what we ask people to do is to think of this larger circle as a pie and to cut themselves 3 pieces of pie. The first is the size of what you know. So usually I take about 30, 40 seconds to ask people to cut that piece of pie out of the whole, and then to tell me what it is that they know for sure. And I usually ask for about 2 or 3 responses, and then we move on to the next section, which is...
And we typically give an example ourselves just to get that conversation rolling. For instance, I know how to drive stick shift, and then people will mark it out there. The second piece to this is to cut yourself a second slice of pie of what you think you don't know, or what you know you don't know. And then we also warn them that we have a third piece of pie, so please consider this as your second piece and cut it, because it's very easy for us to say, well, everything else is what I don't know, and we don't want them to do that.
Yep. So we have the first piece of pie, which is what you know, which typically is a relatively small piece of pie. Then we have what we don't know, which is typically considerably larger than the first piece of pie. And then we have this mystery third piece of pie, and you probably can guess what that is. That is what you don't know you don't know, or your blind spot. And we like using the word blind spot because it carries on through the rest of the lessons. So if we look at what we know we don't know, and our blind spot, all three of those create for us what we call the paradigm. Paradigm. I used to say paradigm because I was hooked on phonics. It works for me, right? But that's one of our jokes that we use in the session. And so, how have you heard people talk about a paradigm in the session when you introduce those three pieces of the pie as the paradigm?
Typically, we hear the word paradigm shift. And it's interesting because when you ask people to define paradigm, it's difficult for people to come up with a definition, but we know what it means in context. And so here we kind of use that as that example of what you know, what you don't know, and what you don't know you don't know is what defines how you approach everything in your life. And so my paradigm is likely very different from Andre's paradigm. And so what we are doing here is trying to find the commonalities and differences and seeing how we work together.
Yeah. Because how you see the world will dictate what it is that you see, right? And we also recognize that we don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are, right? So there's lots of research on people who are giving firsthand accounts of events, and all of these individuals oftentimes have very different takes on the same situation. You can even look at your own family and you can see how this might be true, right? So all brothers and sisters in a household or family members don't have the same takeaways from some of the same experiences.
And I grew up learning this quote about, I cried that I had no shoes until I met a man with no feet. And that's that difference, right? We are so focused on our experiences and what we are missing or learning, or, where our growth is. We often don't see what other people see from their different perspective.
So we've just covered two of the major parts of this program. So we're going to stop right here and then we'll come back.